I'm here in the official demo slot for Alation, but I'm not going to sit and do a demo with features and functions. People come to these conferences to learn something, so I'm going to share some good material. A little bit of what we covered at DGIQ in June in San Diego, and I'm just going to reuse some of the stuff that we had there, hoping to go quickly, so the last 10 minutes we can just do some general Q&A. All right? By any chance, was anybody here at the Nashville Analytics Summit back in October? Were you in my session, do you remember? Okay, it's going to look similar, so, okay? All right, cool. All right, so this isn't a first time. Okay, so is finding the answers and finding the data you want something you're challenged with, right? Okay, does it drive you crazy, I guess? Okay, you know, there's things that from a governance perspective we look at and we want to talk more about, right? What data is available? Can I trust it? What are the policies? All those other things. And to me, this is where we have something to talk about. Alation can help you with that. Having any catalog that's doing this stuff the right way can help with that. So again, Jim Barker, I am Director of Professional Services at Alation. I am our thought leader for both data governance and data strategy. I've been doing data stuff for a long time. Okay, got an early start. Learned my first programming language, COBOL, when I was 10 years old because my mom went back to school. Okay. And then about 4 years later, got a chance to do a data project as a sort of a co-op when I was 14 with GTE, the former Big Bell. And then a decade later, did my first paperless claim system where I happened to meet the strongest technical data steward I've ever worked with, knows lots of stuff about lots of different topics, happens to never ever be wrong about anything. Yes, she turned out to be my wife and mother of my children. So, but been doing this a while. Wrote a doctoral dissertation about 12 years ago in data governance, and I steal parts of that with every project I've done in the meantime. Okay. Prior to being at Alation, I was also the director of data management at Honeywell, and while I was there, I managed the data team. Okay. And I also led the Data Governance Council and led our data governance efforts, okay, for automated control systems, about half of Honeywell at that point in time. But the one thing I really learned there is there's people, there's processing technology. I know we all use those terms today. I don't as much, but we really found ways to be successful. What we're going to go through here today is a little bit of focusing on some of the stuff that I saw through that doctoral work, through a lot of field experience. I probably worked with 150 customers in the last 2 years. I've had now my 45th customer that I've consulted with that's won an innovation award in different areas and about 19 patents. So a lot of the stuff that we do and we talk about comes from a wealth of experience in those areas, all right? So again, you have those questions and we're gonna use the catalog to help drive out data insights. Okay, so where do we start? Okay, first point I always like to make, data is a team sport. People are working together, okay? If I go through and data's like my life and has been for a long time, I'm walking down the street, I'm listening to music, all I hear is data, 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 okay? My moniker from my time at Honeywell. But it's really bringing things together, okay? So, and I try to do it in a lightweight form, so the moniker I was given at Alation was making data governance fun. So a lot of people know me to that point. In fact, when I did the Nashville Analytics Summit in October, somebody actually paged Mr. Making Data Governance Fun to the security checkpoint, okay? Because somehow I lost my phone and it was somebody that sort of knew me, so it was a funny day. But what do you do to work together, okay? So when I think of this, I think of 4 main personas, okay? The first being data stewards. Most organizations have a few of those, and maybe we want more. If we're in a federated model, they span across the overall organization. If you have a centralized team, they may be just in that centralized group. But they're a key set of people that we have. I could break that down into technical data stewards, business data stewards, enterprise data stewards, compliance data stewards. I tend not to do that so much, all right? What I think about that as sort of the one group persona. Next one is data analysts. There's a bunch more than what you have on the data steward side that are really working with building out those next set of reports, doing those other things. I like getting some pretty fine definition about the differences between a data steward and a data analyst. In addition to that, we've got data engineers, probably more than we have data stewards. And they're doing a lot of really good work. We never have as many as we want, so we're trying to find ways to automate and do things and help to drive those things forward. Again, an important persona. And then the last one I've got here is knowledge workers. So one of the areas where I am puzzled sometimes is in our discussion around data culture, okay? In that, and it might be just from I was lucky enough to work with some firms that were really, really pretty solid in data overall. I joined Thomson Legal and Regulatory, part of Thomson Reuters now in 2000, and our whole project was to go and implement SAP and be able to change dynamically when new features, new products came up. So they were actually selling real data products before the data products we talk about today. Things like Westlaw is one example of it. But lots of people were knowledge workers. We had probably 6,000 in our building alone that were using the analytics that were coming out of what we're working with. I think often if you talk with some folks, some of my peers where I work, we don't talk a lot about that knowledge worker bucket, but that's sort of the masses that we want to get to when things are working really well for us, okay? So 4 different personas. So the thing about that is the data stewards are the key glue to bring things together, okay? So when we do get those 4 groups working together, we've got a centralized catalog, we've got great policies and procedures, we've got a really efficient data engineering operation, we've got a lot of things available, and we can use the catalog to find what we're looking for, to drive things forward, to go through those questions from before. Then what do we have? We got a data party, okay? Notice the people in yellow. Those would be the stewards. Yes, I'm a Badger fan, and yes, this is the jump around, okay? But the idea here is, what can we do with a small group of folks to really align people and bring people together when we're trying to drive out our data program, okay? I go back to that time when I was at Thomson in the early 2000s. We had 8 people on our centralized data team. We had a power user group in finance and in marketing. And we managed to drive out analytics, and I think we had 343 reports that came out of the gate, and we saw huge, huge benefits in the things that we did, okay? That is an important point in time, I believe, because really I think what you saw Thomson do at that point was really invent big data, okay? We had this Venn diagram that we used all the time that had business system data. It had telemetry data and external data. We brought all that stuff together, working heavily with IBM, and then IBM really took that big data term to market and get to the 4 Vs and everything else, right? But at the heart of this, it's what do we do to bring people together? So Redmond talked a little bit about that this morning, to come up with a model that really works for us to get more value out of our data and have those verifiable outcomes and just feel really strong about the things that we're doing. Okay, so Elation is data governance, my point of view. Okay, this is a wonderful diagram that I've had 13 years working with and evolving it out. The left-hand pillar are some basic functionality that we'll talk about in any good data program. And the stuff on the right comes out of my doctoral work and has been expanded on how the market has changed over time. Okay, so we're going to start out talking on the left-hand side and talking about some key features. I'm not going to do demo per se, but we'll talk about where these things are. And the big thing is, why are these things important, all right? So the first one we're going to go to is about glossary. So sat down with Andrew White from Gartner in April, I think it was, and then again in May, and we talked about governance overall, and his point of view is everybody starts with a glossary, and that's a big part of what you need to use for governance, okay? To me, the value in the glossary is really getting that definition down and sharing it. When I worked for Best Buy in the 90s, I remember I was a junior at the time, and we had, I think, 200 hours of staff time to define what net profit meant, right? It took a lot to get to that point, and we had this, I call it the Kinko's model of a catalog. Basically, we printed off our data models and then went to Kinko's, got them printed off, and gave them to everybody that could build a report, right? To me, this is a key piece of functionality that we want to be thinking about. It's first for a reason. Okay, second one is about policies, being able to discover policies. So I've got a blog post that I was going to post on Sunday. I didn't get around to it, but policies are really important, but everybody moans and groans and nobody wants to spend any time with them. And I think it's because we get so wrapped up into it being the rules and regs and not thinking about standard operating procedures or how-tos or a lot of the other things that we can do to drive things out, okay? So I have a kid, he's a sophomore in college, he's working at Atlas Public Policy this quarter for his service project here in town, about a mile away from here. And I was talking to him before he left because he'd always give me a bad time. Oh, you're just a data person, you don't know anything, right? The great thing about 18, 19, 20-year-olds. Anyway, so he's, one, doing a policy project, and two, he's doing a data project. So I'm just having a great time with this, right? But policies is how we get better, how we do things, and it's meant to be helpful and not being restrictive. So if you listen to Signer talk about governance, he talks about command, he starts with command and control as the first definition. Too often people think about policies as being what command and control is, and it doesn't have to be, right? You can be looking at things about how do I get access to something? What do I do when we've got a security breach? What happens when we accidentally said some privacy data to somebody, PII data to somebody that shouldn't have gotten it? So this is a helpful area, and being able to search and find it is another important thing that you want to have as part of your governance program. And here you'll see we're talking about all different personas can take advantage of it, okay? The next one we've got is talking about workflow. So this is the idea of, and this is a little bit of an elation heavier thing, what do we do to have a community of contributors so we can have lots of people curating data? Yes, we want to do what we can do with AI and automate whenever we can, but what can we do to get everybody involved to share their knowledge to help to drive things forward? At the same time, being able to have a set of peer review that fits our organization and not make it big and arduous to drive anything out, okay? So that's what we're talking about when we think about workflow. So here you'll notice there's no knowledge workers involved. It tends to be data stewards and data analysts. And data engineers are working together to collect this information, okay? All right, so the next one is conversation. So this is, again, a piece of elation functionality, but I think the functionality and how it gets used is the most important, okay? What we're talking about with conversations is what do we do when we wind up having a problem? There isn't a data owner, there isn't a data steward assigned. We got definitions that are wrong, or like I don't know where to find something. Using conversations to open up the dialogue to get the help that we want, okay? If you talk to people that have been doing data governance for a long time, okay, one of the things that we always sort of talk about is the idea that we've got a centralized inbox, okay? That inbox is where all these generalized questions come, and how do we facilitate that? The beauty we've got here in the conversation side is now when I go and ask that question and somebody answers it, it can automatically get tagged off to that particular object. So when the next person has the same problem, they're going to be like, oh, this is defunct data. I shouldn't be using this. I'm glad that answer was there in the first place, okay? And then the last one is elation analytics. I brought it up in this room a couple of hours ago, but the idea here is what can you do to have analytics on top of your catalog, on top of your data? So analytics on top of analytics to be able to do analytics was a smart aleck comment I made earlier in the day, okay? But the idea here is what do we do to understand what workflows we have that are outstanding, what data is being used, what data can I trust or not trust, and have that be actionable for the other things that I'm trying to do. So when we bring those 5 things together, we think we go back and it gives me that sort of centralized place where I can store information to do things and have a very successful data program. That's where I always want to start, okay? This is the elation wheel. We use this when we're implementing with a customer. I'm not going to walk through this today, okay, rest assured. But the idea here is we start on the front end and we find out what is our vision, what is our vision, what is our mission, organize people, which comes from figuring out who your stewards are, figure out who your owners are, driving that forward, and then have a vision of where you're trying to get to in 2 years, and then and I always talk about a mission as being what's my 6-month plan, okay? And then getting my data governance council in place and doing things to align people to drive things forward. I bring data into the catalog. I give a lot of power to my stewards to drive things forward. And then I'm really trying to push things to a point where I've got a community of people working together and we're going to do things to monitor and measure what's really going on in our data ecosystem. Okay. All right, so back to the pillar diagram, but I'm going on the right-hand side here. Okay, and what we've got is, I'm going to go through each of these sections fairly quickly, but on the security side, a lot of people look at data security and they try to keep them away, right? Where I'm somebody that believes that you embrace the CISO and the people that are doing the data security things because they're helpful to you when you've got a good solid partnership. Within a catalog, if I can find out who owns this data, who uses this data, how often is it used before I make a data security change, that can be pretty powerful stuff. Equally, if this is how I can get to my policies and roll out a new data security policy and make it easy for people to see it, that can be super helpful for me too, okay? If I go into data quality, I look at data quality as being sort of center of everything that we do, okay? When I think of catalogs, they don't necessarily have to be a data quality tool, but if they can bring together the details that we have, that's where we can have some pretty good value. What data can I trust? Why can't I trust it? Give me some granular detail. Maybe the mass of people are going to go to the catalog to see what that looks like. And I've got my data quality specialists that are going to jump off and go back to whatever data quality, data observability tool we're using, okay? Lots of good stuff there to drive things forward. If you can't trust the data, you can't use it. And then my least favorite conversation I ever have is, I can't run this analytics because I can't trust the data, okay? Specify, give me the specifics so I can do something about it. The catalog can help us drive that forward, okay? Data ops, so this to me is, what are all the things we're doing to build out these data pipelines? What are we doing? And as we're doing it, let's collect things that we learn, record them, and make them available when we're rolling out those solutions. Okay. Compliance is basically the oversight side of things. If I've got my data quality policies, I've got my data privacy policies, I've got my security policies, I've got my standard ways of operating, compliance is oversight to make sure they're being followed, okay? I used to use a lot, and I don't do it as much now, but the little bing bing sound from the Law and Order opening, right? There's two sides of this. One, what are my rules and how am I following them? If I'm not making sure that these things are followed, why do I have a policy in the first place, right? Okay. And then the last of the 6 pillars is data enablement. So there's been a lot of discussion in the last couple of years around stop calling things data governance, instead call it data enablement. In a way, I'm sort of not a big supporter of that idea. If people don't think about all the other things that are part of governance, if you're calling it enablement because it's easier to sell it and get people on board, by all means do it, okay? One of my favorite stories from earlier in the year was I was working with 2 different companies, and they both presented for us at DGIQ, so I think I can share this. The one was Thermo Fisher, which talks about data governance and enablement. EGE is their team. And then I was working with EA, Electronic Arts, the video game maker, right? And they were trying to figure out what their name was, and they had EDG. And I was like, EDG, interesting. And they were working on a massive re-rollout of their data governance functionality. And they had just, a couple weeks earlier, rolled out a new Star Wars video game, and this was in May. So on May the 4th, they rolled out their new data governance program. All the key personas had a different Star Wars character associated with them. And I was like, Ben, why don't you call it EDGE, Enterprise Data Governance and Enablement, right? And that's what they jumped on, and they got a lot of positive feedback from the team and moving forward with that, okay? But to me, enablement is, and I think DirecTV did a presentation for us at Snowflake this summer, and they got a lot of value out of using the catalog to collect everything that they have and then use it to distribute out the different things that they're looking for to really drive out the use of a new data capability or a new data product or whatever you're going to refer to it as, okay? So to me, those 6 pillars all work together to drive that forward, okay? Benefits of using a catalog, all these things are on the screen. I'm not going to read through them today. But I've got this diagram that I didn't use in this deck that I like to reference back to, where I've got a catalog at the base, okay? And then on top of that, I've got my data governance program, okay? On top of that, I've got things like being able to search for things, being able to use more things, governing things. And at the top, I've got data literacy. And by bringing all these things together, that gives me my data culture, right? That gets to the point where where people are thinking for data first, okay? So working in a manufacturing shop, when I worked for Honeywell, everybody in IT had to go through Six Sigma certification, continuous process improvement, right? But what that did is that got everybody thinking about continuous process improvement and the tools that are associated with that anytime we went through and had anything that any problem that we ran into. So to me, the great data culture and being data driven is every time one of these challenges come up, the first thing I'm thinking about is how do I get a report to show what that looks like to give me my baseline, and then come back to the report on a regular basis to see if it's improving. And sharing those pictures and what that detail is a big way to get successful, okay, as we drive forward with that, okay. I tried to get everybody scanned in. We're going to send you links to the 8 white papers that correspond to the 6 pillars: data quality, data security, data privacy, data ops, and compliance, and also data architecture and data leadership, okay? So these things all working together is how you have a successful data program in my view, okay? And we'll, again, send you links where you can download each of these if you're interested in it. By the way, here's a poll. Which of these do you think was most downloaded since we've relieved it? Any ideas?
Data quality getting started.
Data quality getting started is number 2. Okay, it was actually a little bit of a trick question. Any ideas? The data architecture one, which was a shock to me. Okay. But overall, and they've all had a good amount of traffic and drive things forward. And I thought doing this was a fun exercise because it took the stuff that I wrote a decade ago and it sort of refreshed it. And the good news is the first 3/4 of it is all about just general information and that space. And we don't talk about Alation until the last little bit. Okay, so it's meant to educate as more than to sell in that case. Okay, so we've got about 9 minutes. Questions from folks about anything? Cool. How many people have a catalog? Okay, how many people have Alation? How did somebody raise their hand when they don't have a catalog and they were, okay, so we'll work on that, okay? So what about, just overall, what are any big challenges that you see in the space that you think are worthy of attention? You guys, yeah.
The challenge we have is just making the catalog sticky, like making it part of it's new to our organization, so making it part of like the stewards or business users that deal with Blackberry.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, so great question. So the question was, I'll paraphrase a little bit, new to having a catalog, how do you make it sticky? How do you get people to use it and drive forward? Okay. Internally inside Alation, that's a question that we talk a lot about, okay? But most of my colleagues are more interested in what do we do about the catalog, and I would pivot that one, and I would say, what are we doing? I look at the catalog as being a tool set. I care more about what can I do to get higher adoption and higher use of my data assets overall and all the other investment, right? And then the catalog is part of that. So going back to Alation Analytics that I went through quickly, the idea that I can go through and see, I call them vanity metrics. How many logins do I have, this week, this month, this quarter, this year, right? That tells me something. But does it tell me the whole story? If somebody just logged in and they can't find it and they go and they find it somewhere else, and they do that a bunch of times because they're trying their best, that's not as valuable as I want to go through and see, okay, what are my certified assets around a given object? And that's where search and discovery in the catalog will be there. So one of the things that I always recommend is building out a community of practice. And the community of practice doesn't need to be around the Alation catalog. It can be around your overall data program, right? And I've got this community of practice. I get everybody together once a quarter. When I did this for the first time at Honeywell, it's an interesting story. I invited it. I had 45 people there, okay? And 42 of those people worked for me, okay? So maybe not a great indicator. But the next time we had over 100, okay? And I only had 10 people that worked for me. That's a different data point, okay? But what we did is we had a set agenda that we used all the time. The first thing was general announcements. Second thing is we would dig deep into a business-heavy topic, where people can get benefit. Third would be a technical topic with a business twist to it, so something that's technical but the business folks are going to like. And then we had open Q&A at the end, right? And I think the third time we met, we had over 1,000 people, right? That's the sign that you're doing something there. So building up that community of people that are working together and driving forward is I think one of the things we can do to help to drive adoption. It's building that promotional program to say these are the things that are available to us. Okay, cool. Other questions?
I was kind of curious, so if you're starting on a data catalog journey and most of the tools right now have some auto discovery, so if you let them loose, how do you avoid risking to do a lot of data quality work once it puts in auto categorizes a lot of metadata and stuff?
Yeah, so the question is if you're new at driving out a catalog initiative and you've got all the ability, if we went back to the wheel and saw the being able to auto ingest, and then we can autofill now that AI is going to solve all of our problems. Okay, sorry, there was sarcasm there, intentional. How do we stop from causing all kinds of additional quality issues that we have, right? So I think there's a couple things. One is you're actually talking about data, basically data metadata governance now to drive that forward. My thing is you start kind of the message you might have heard from Renee earlier in this room today. I start small. I've got some core things I'm going to look for and drive that out. I've actually taken Danette McGilvery's 10 steps to executing data quality projects, and I've turned it into a 12 steps to execute, and it talks about just that. So we go in and we ingest all the data, then we'll go through it and we'll identify what data do we need to govern. So we're not going to govern everything, okay? And then we're going to go through and look at what fields we need to address data quality on. And then once we look at that, then we start looking at building reports and data quality checks to drive through the rest of it, to drive out the rest of what we have.
How much was the business involvement in this process? I mean, where all do you have business coming in?
So I think I'm one of those believers that data governance is never in IT or never purely in the business. It's sort of in this layer between, right? So you're going to have some data stewards and you're going to have other people on the business side that are going to be part of that overall exercise, because we're going to say, because one of the things I usually do in that same chart is help to identify risk on the data object. So say we've said that these material fields are really critical to us. They're CDEs. And now we're going to go through and we want to understand what's the risk if these are wrong, because that can help us with our prioritized list of what we're going to do to drive those things forward. Help?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Okay, any other questions? Okay, so we're going to do one fun thing to end with. I'm going to go 1, I'm going to go 2, and I'm going to go 3, and you're going to say ice cream. Okay? 1, 2, 3. Ice cream. Very good. Have a nice rest of your day.